Hello everyone, Garnetta here, and today I'm doing a little bit of a different video because I'd like to talk about a condition called dyspraxia. It is a condition I suffer from, and this week is actually Dyspraxia Awareness Week, which I think is very important because one of the biggest issues with dyspraxia is that not many people know about it. It's very hard. If you say to someone you've got dyspraxia, most people don't know what you're talking about. Thankfully, that is what this week is all about changing, and thankfully it got off to a real big start with Doctor Who. Of all things, Doctor Who has really put its foot forward in trying to help with awareness about this. One of the new companions, Ryan, has dyspraxia, and it affects him in some very common ways that dyspraxia affects people. And yeah, I just thought that I would do a bit of a video to build on that. I know that Doctor Who's doing a fantastic job of raising awareness, but they are limited by being a Doctor Who, by being a science fiction program, so they can't go into the detail as to what exactly dyspraxia is and how it can affect people. So in the hopes of either helping people to understand the condition, or if you are suffering from it, help you know that you're not alone, or whatever reason, however this can possibly help, I thought I would do a video explaining dyspraxia a bit more in depth and how it affects myself. So the first question I'd like to answer is, what is dyspraxia? Dyspraxia is a form of developmental coordination disorder. It's a common disorder that affects about 5% of the population and affects fine and gross motor coordination. That means, I'll go into a bit more detail about what that means later on. It can also affect speech. One thing to note is that I will be taking a little bit less care with editing in this one and editing my voice. So you will be able to see that there is quite a few times when I stumble over my words and things like that. That is actually a part of dyspraxia that is a major part of the condition. It is a lifelong condition. It is something which will never go away and never get cured. Some people can combat certain parts of it, usually through some form of coping mechanism or a lot of practice. It can still affect people in a lot of different ways though. Generally speaking, people with dyspraxia can struggle with activities that other people consider to be basic, such as self-care or writing, riding a bike, DIY. These sorts of things can all be a lot harder for somebody with dyspraxia. One of the other problems with dyspraxia is that nobody actually knows the exact causes of dyspraxia. It's believed that the condition roots in there being some form of issue from the communication from your brain reaching other parts of your body, as well as weak muscle tone. However, studies haven't managed to locate the root yet. There is nothing in the brain functioning that seems to explain why dyspraxia acts the way that it does and influences people in the way that it does. Dyspraxia is a pain in the butt to discuss and a pain in the butt to try and explain because it affects everyone differently. For example, in Doctor Who, Ryan cannot ride the bike for the life of him. And I am the opposite. I can ride a bike. I struggle a little bit with balance. I'm not as good on the bike as most people, but at the same time I can ride a bike and I can do it for a decent amount of time. On a Doctor Who Facebook group, this was a major point of a debate that happened because a lot of people were claiming that they could ride a bike perfectly fine, so that Doctor Who was just playing up that particular point for emphasis, and other people were saying that they completely are in the same boat as Ryan in not being able to ride a bike. So a lot of people do have that where a symptom will affect them but not other people. It can also be tricky because a lot of the problems are, if you look at them one at a time, can come across as trivial or as a personal flaw. For example, bad rhythm is one of the symptoms. I personally have no rhythm whatsoever, and I'm left questioning whether that is a personal flaw, that I just don't have any rhythm, or if that is the condition of dyspraxia. And it's really hard when you don't know whether or not it is you or the dyspraxia that is affecting things. So I'm now just going to quickly go how precisely dyspraxia can affect things, some of the symptoms that there can be. I will be posting in the description a link to the Dyspraxia Foundation website and a list of the symptoms, all the symptoms that there are. I would also suggest, if you know someone with dyspraxia, asking them. As I say, it can affect different people in different ways, and usually somebody with dyspraxia will know how it affects them personally. I'll largely be going through it from my point of view because that way I can explain a bit better how it affects me on a day-to-day basis. So one of the first big things is that gross motor coordination skills, in other words large movements, are very difficult for a lot of different reasons. First of all, balance is a major issue for people with dyspraxia. It's very hard to keep your balance, especially on things like bikes and hills and things like that. It's just very hard to actually keep the balance and keep it going. It's also quite hard to have rhythm, and you can tend to trip or fall or bump into things very, very frequently. There's also a massive problem with hand-eye coordination that I suffer from with my dyspraxia, which means that it's very difficult to do things that require throwing or controlling depth perception and things like that. I quite often struggle with any form of aim or anything like that. Another interesting point which a lot of people don't actually associate with dyspraxia is flat feet. Whereas most people have arches on their feet, there is a condition called flat feet where you literally don't have them. I have flat feet, and that is actually a part of the dyspraxia. As I mentioned earlier on, weak muscle tone is a part of it, which means that it's quite hard to stand in a long place, in the same place for a long time, and it can be quite unstable, and that also is why flat feet is very common in people with dyspraxia. And yeah, that does mean that things like walking is a lot harder as well. The next way that it usually affects people is with their fine motor skills, so that's small movements. It makes it quite hard for manual dexterity, so doing things that are fidgety or small, especially with two-handed things. So things like using cutlery or ironing or playing musical instruments is very hard because quite often you can't control the two hands with fidgety things and with the delicacy that is needed for those sort of things. It's very hard to actually manage those, especially if you're trying to do two different things with the different hands. This is also a bit of a problem with all limbs. It's not just hands, feet I have this problem with as well. I personally cannot drive a car. I did have some lessons and I was progressing really slowly because I was unable to use all four limbs for different purposes at the same time. It's also quite hard to use things like pens and things, which is why handwriting is usually very bad. A lot of people struggle with drawing, and usually using things like tools and things like that and locks is quite hard and difficult. It can also be quite hard to get dressed, things like shaving and getting clothes on correctly and things like that, and tying shoelaces is a massive problem because again, the just fidgetiness of a lot of these sorts of things. It can also affect speech. I mentioned this one briefly earlier and you may have picked up on it during this video. Like I say, I've been allowing a few more of the mistakes to slip through than I would do in a regular video. It also, as well as being sometimes a bit hard to get the words in the correct order and say the words correctly, it also is something where we can end up repeating ourselves quite a lot or rephrasing things in a slightly different way because we don't know if our point is getting across. It's one of them where our brains kind of work a little bit differently, at least in my case this is the case. As I say, dyspraxia affects different people in different ways. But yeah, I personally struggle to order my thoughts, so I won't know if what I'm saying is coming out right. So I tend to repeat myself a lot. And because I'm repeating myself a lot, that means that it gets very repetitive, because I will just repeat myself a lot, and I will repeat the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And that is one of the sort of things that is a case with dyspraxia and can make them seem odd and seem stupid. A lot of people can mistake dyspraxia for low intelligence. It's not low intelligence. I might be thick, but at the same time, it's not because of the dyspraxia. The dyspraxia doesn't make me low intelligence. It makes it harder for me to get my point across, which can come across wrong. Perception can also be affected by dyspraxia. Generally speaking, all of the senses are a little bit tricky. It's not all of them for all of us. For me, my main thing is hearing, but it can be for all the senses in the same similar sort of way. With hearing, I have a massive problem with telling between foreground and background noise. Somebody can be sat next to me and I won't hear what they're saying because it'll just register as background noise. At the same time, sometimes somebody a few tables away from me, or, you know, a little bit away from me, will say something and I will register it as something important, as something that is being said to me, even if it's really not. This can be the case with all sorts of different senses. One person I know had this problem with smell. He basically just really struggled to distinguish smells. And it can also have a bit of a problem with sense of times and speed and distances. I mentioned my aim earlier on. Another problem with that is that I have a lot of problem with spatial awareness. I won't know when I'm getting too close. And I will lose track of time incredibly. That is a massive part of my problem. I will not realise how long has progressed. And that can cause a lot of problems with cooking and with appointments and things like that. It does affect my timekeeping quite a bit there. And also, it can be hard. People with dyspraxia tend to have a poor sense of direction. I say people with dyspraxia, I keep on saying that. I don't know that many people with dyspraxia. This is my own personal experience. It is on the symptoms list, but I don't know how many people actually are affected by that exact thing. As I mentioned earlier on, it is quite hard to organise thoughts, which does mean it can be hard to do more than one task at once. For example, if I'm going into the other room to get 5 different items, the odds are that I will come back with 3 items, one of them will be wrong. I'll have completely forgotten what the other 2 are, and to be honest, the other 2 items that I actually managed to bring will probably not be right anyway. It can be a bit of a problem with that sort of thing, and again, that can make a dyspraxic person seem low intelligence when it's not at all. It also, people with dyspraxia, I can get very easily distracted. Ooh, look, a cloud. I do tend to get very distracted. It can also come across as a sense of humour as well. It's sort of like, a lot of the time, you can daydream or wander around aimlessly and just sort of go off topic and on a tangent and not realise, because of that scattered thought that I mentioned, you can just sort of seem very unfocused and erratic. This does mean that a lot of people struggle with maths and reading and things like that. Personally, I don't have that much of a problem with that. I have a bit of trouble getting it out. I have a bit of trouble writing things down and getting my point across, but I don't have a problem with actually doing the maths and things like that. There is then emotional issues. Generally speaking, it is quite hard to socialise with this more than just one person. It's very hard to actually focus on the different people, different changes, everything like that. It's also very hard to get non-verbal signs. I need everything spelling out for me. I do not get subtlety whatsoever. There is actually one thing on the symptoms list which puts it perfectly: may listen but not understand. I'm not going to struggle with taking the words that you're saying in, but I might not understand the meaning. If you say something with an angry or sarcastic tone, that may just go completely over my head. So when you're thanking me sarcastically for doing something, I will take that as a serious thank you. It also, a part of the mental aspects of it, it's very hard to adapt to change, especially immediate change. I personally don't have a problem if I know a change is coming, yeah. But if I have a plan to meet a friend, for example, and they cancel at the last second, that throws me off all night. That really does throw me completely. There have been 1 or 2 times when I've had a plan where I'm going to something, and then because one of my friends has backed out, I just don't go to the event or whatever I was planning on doing. I'll often completely lose out because of a change of plan at the last minute. It's very hard to deal with that for me. Also, the final thing is that it's quite hard for people with dyspraxia to control their emotions. It's very easy to get stressed or anxious, and generally speaking, a lot of people with dyspraxia are prone to low self-esteem and emotional outbursts, as well as holding on to things a lot longer. I had an incident with somebody who was a good friend of mine who betrayed my trust like 9 years ago, and it still haunts me. It's one of them where those things embed into you a lot deeper than they normally would. It's an obsession. It becomes an obsession and eats away. At the same time, it can also lead to sort of addictive behaviour and obsessions in a not so negative way. A lot of people that are hooked into fandoms like Pokemon and Doctor Who, a lot of that is that personality that the dyspraxic people have, where it is that obsessiveness. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, it can be an obsessiveness into a franchise or a project or something like that. So overall, those are sort of the base symptoms, but the thing that a lot of people tend to forget when they look at the symptoms list and explain the dyspraxia is that it's not strictly just those. Quite often things can cascade in a lot of ways. So for example, I mentioned earlier on about dealing with people face to face in a group. This means that whenever I am in a group, whenever I am in a social situation, I'm constantly judging myself and constantly paranoid about things, which is because of my dyspraxia, even if it's not a direct symptom. This means that I struggle with all social interactions and prefer to be online and basically operate without having to be face to face with someone. And that is something which I know a lot of dyspraxic people have that as well. When they are having to deal with people face to face, they will either have some form of coping mechanism or try to avoid it in favour of going online or something. This was actually quite noticeable. If you pay attention in Doctor Who, Ryan was constantly on his phone. When he needed to express his emotions, he did it over YouTube. So yeah, that's based, and there is more cascading things like that, how they affect people. So yeah, like I mentioned, there is a lot of trust issues for me because of the fact that I hold on to things a lot more and obsess over, and it can make a lot of things very hard. However, it's not all doom and gloom. So far I've been very negative about dyspraxia, and I'm sure you can understand why so far if you've reached this point. But it's not all bad. People with dyspraxia are very known for being very empathetic, very understanding of people. I know that I have that quite a bit. With a few of my friends, they have their own mental issues, and I feel like I can understand and get inside their head a lot better. Even though their mental issues aren't the same as mine, it seems like I'm able to deal with that a lot better than other people are. Also, dyspraxic people are known for having a great sense of humour. Admittedly, my friends all roll eyes when I tell a joke, but yeah, it's one of them where people with dyspraxia are supposed to have a really good sense of humour and be very caring and very open and trusting. But one thing which I solidly believe is that because of how their brains work differently, because of how we have these struggles with basic everyday things, we have a unique way of viewing the world. And by unique, I don't mean dyspraxic people have a special way of seeing things. I mean every single person with dyspraxia that I've spoken to in person is so different and so out of the norm. And actually, there are quite a lot of celebrities that are known to have been diagnosed with dyspraxia or suspected to have dyspraxia. And a lot of them have got their claim to fame by their uniqueness. For example, Richard Branson, the owner, the creator of one of the biggest companies in the entire world, Virgin Enterprises, has dyspraxia. Daniel Radcliffe, the actor that plays Harry Potter, has dyspraxia. Albert Einstein, a genius, someone who has shaped the way we understand the world, had dyspraxia. Well, it's believed he had dyspraxia. Experts have said that they believe they had it. Also, Picasso was supposed to have had dyspraxia as well. One of the best artists, yes, artists of all time, had dyspraxia. It's so unique. And for me, there is one that stands out above the rest of them as the celebrity that has dyspraxia that has a place in my heart and so many other people's hearts. Robin Williams, legend, comedian, fantastic person who has touched the hearts of so many people because of his unique humour and because of his unique presence and because of just being him. He had dyspraxia. I would argue that maybe a part of his dyspraxia is a part of why he was so fantastic, because of that uniqueness that he brings. So it's not all doom and gloom. it is possible to get past these difficulties because there are a lot of celebrities that have and have managed to be worldwide known names. So if you suffer from dyspraxia, don't give up. If you know someone with dyspraxia, I urge you to reach out to them because I think that they will be going through a lot of difficulties that are very unique and that they could use help with. B, the acknowledgement. People acknowledging dyspraxia. Since the Doctor Who episode a couple of days ago, it has been so special. People actually acknowledging dyspraxia to me. 1 or 2 people actually coming to me and saying, yeah, don't you have this condition? Because I've mentioned it in passing before and they've actually now noticed it and are aware of it. It is such a big thing. And C, I think you will find it very interesting to see their perspective. Like I say, every single dyspraxic person that I've spoken to has a very unique view of the world. And yeah, I really hope that this video can help you to understand dyspraxia a bit better and hopefully to help raise awareness. And if you have dyspraxia, I hope that it's helped you to know that you're not alone and that this is something that affects a lot of people. If you've stuck to the end, thank you so much. If you have any questions on dyspraxia, I will be leaving a couple of links in the description below to some really useful websites. And if you would like to just ask, then please feel free to either message me on Twitter @TheGarnetto or leave a message in the comments below. And I will answer any questions that you'd like me to answer. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope that this has brought some understanding, and I'll see you next time.